Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. And this is where I take a look at what's going on up there and try to make sense of it down here, what it all means. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking about Aquarius, not the sign of Aquarius and the characteristics of that sign, but most specifically, Saturn's transit of this particular sign. Saturn is, as we speak, in the sign of Aquarius, but it's just a little appetizer. It's only been in there since March the 22nd, and it's going to pop out of there any day now. But it will go eventually into the sign and begin its proper transit of Aquarius on December the 17th of this year, 2020. And so we want to have lots of preparation for that. And what I also wanted to look at in this very briefly before we get into what the Saturn in Aquarius means for every single zodiac sign, I wanted to look at the age of Aquarius because I think it's very relevant. By the time we get to December of this year, Jupiter will also enter Aquarius, and in 2023, Pluto will also go into Aquarius. So we've got some very mighty, powerful planets moving into this sign. And I think it really develops, or I don't want to use the word signal because I believe we're already in the age of Aquarius. But certainly these are going to be very formative periods in the whole of the age of Aquarius. Now, I know most of you have heard about the Age of Aquarius, if nothing else because of the song. This is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius, and I'm not about to sing it. You wouldn't like it if I started to sing. But this is based on the idea of the great cycle of the astrological ages. I won't get into the technicality of it all. It has to do with the wobble of the Earth, changing its position over a great cycle of time, to do with the sun's passage around the ecliptic. And what happens is that it moves about a degree every 72 years. And that means that it takes 25,850 years to do a complete revolution of the zodiac. And each, if you can divide that 25,000 plus years into 12 zodiac signs, you get about 2,000 years for each zodiac sign. Now, it's believed that the age of Pisces came in with Jesus Christ, and we, of course, have moved a couple of thousand years on from that point. And so the age of Aquarius has either begun or it's set to begin very shortly. And there are various theories about when this happened or when it's going to happen. And you'll find them as different as there are different characteristics of the zodiac sign. But I've had a look into this myself, and I think that probably the age began, it had its official starting point on February the 4th to 5th of 1962. And the reason I talk about that being the beginning is there was a spectacular lineup of planets in Aquarius. We had a solar eclipse, the sun conjunct the moon, and it was a total solar eclipse in Aquarius, and Mercury and Venus and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn, all the personal planets, plus Jupiter and Saturn, were all in the sign of Aquarius. And that seems to me to be a very fitting beginning, a kind of triumphal march that enrolled or allowed Aquarius to come in. Now, I have to say also that when we think about an age beginning, it's a little bit like a train arriving at the station. The train doesn't suddenly arrive at the station platform. We hear it coming from quite a while away. And that's really what we need to think about the age of Aquarius. It was coming in maybe sometime around the 60s, and maybe that coming in goes on for even more decades. Although I would say that with Saturn into Aquarius, Jupiter into Aquarius again, and Pluto into Aquarius, I think we're firmly in it by that point. And I want to really talk about what that might mean in terms of the flavor of that particular age. Now, if we go back to the 1960s and we think about what was happening, particularly in 1962 when there was that alignment, then we had the human rights movement beginning. In fact, I think, if my memory serves me well, Nelson Mandela was imprisoned at that time, and Saturn was in Aquarius. And 30 years later, 29 years later, when he was released from jail, Saturn was again in Aquarius. So we've got the idea that Saturn in the sign of Aquarius has a lot to do with human rights, and it most certainly does. Aquarius is the sign of brotherhood, the brotherhood of man. And it's also a sign that we associate with crossing boundaries and moving into unseen, unknown realms. That's very Aquarius. So we have the space age. It's also a rather bohemian sign in many ways, Aquarius. And of course, the 60s brought us, the me generation, really, the flower power, all those, the power of youth to change everything, the power of peace versus, peace and love. These were all the kind of buzzwords of that period of time. We have that really reflected in the sign of Aquarius. But Aquarius is ruled by two planets, and although we give Aquarius Uranus as its planetary ruler since it was discovered in 1781, there is a residue and certainly an association of Saturn with Aquarius. Saturn used to rule Aquarius until that point. And in fact, very interesting when you think up until 1781, Saturn was thought to be the outermost planet in the solar system. There was absolutely nothing beyond that. So when Uranus was spotted, it broke all sorts of belief systems. And that's very curious in the sense that, Uranus is the most iconoclastic planet. It breaks all the rules. It's things we thought were one way are now a new way. And so it seems somewhat appropriate that Aquarius, ruled originally by Saturn, should now embrace Uranus, and yet both rulers are applicable. And I think importantly here, there is a lot of belief, and I think it's found by optimism, that the age of Aquarius will be this wonderful utopia where, we will all be equals. We will have the brotherhood of man. But frankly, I do think that's a bit of a pipe dream. And in fact, I think what we may be looking at a little more is the new world of 1984, the George Orwellian dystopia, where we had Big Brother, where we had, the eye in the sky, as it were, looking at all of us, invading our freedoms. And we had, Newspeak and MindThink and all those things that were interfering with our freedoms. So I think the age of Aquarius, as it gets into full flood with Saturn in Aquarius and then Pluto in Aquarius, is probably going to be a little bit of a less than flower power place, if we could call it that. And what is so interesting is, of course, that with Saturn going into Aquarius, as it did in late March of 2020, this year, that coincided with the big lockdowns that we have all experienced because of the coronavirus. And when you think about it, you think about freedom in Aquarius, Saturn comes into Aquarius and suddenly we're all social distancing. So in a way, it has really, I won't say life imitates art, but life certainly reflects the astrology as we know it. So I will talk about the age of Aquarius and various other aspects to this. I mean, there will be a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in December in Aquarius. That's going to be extremely meaningful for us all. And of course, Jupiter's transit of Aquarius is going to have a very different kind of note to it than the Jupiter in Capricorn that we have at present. So I will cover all these things in the future. But for now, I really want to look at Saturn in Aquarius. Now, we have to go back to 1991 to about 1994 when Saturn was last in Aquarius. And again, this was just post the the coming down of the Berlin Wall and East and West, and the Soviet Union broken up and the arrival of Russia. There was a huge amount of change in 1991, 2, 3, and 4. We really had redefined a lot of boundaries, and you know how much I've talked about that, in the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So we got a flavor of Saturn Aquarius there, that it was still attached to freedom and the idea of freedom being why people were protesting and why things were changing. So we certainly know already with Saturn in Aquarius that that's part and parcel of what's going on. We can see protests happening at this point. On this occasion, it is about freedom again. This time, the fact that we've been placed in lockdown, a lot of people are protesting that they want their freedom. So we can see that's a real characteristic of Saturn in Aquarius. So let's have a look at what it means sign by sign. First of all, let's begin with Aquarius. If you are a Sun Aquarian, you were born with the Sun in Aquarius. Now, of course, this is going to have a huge impact on you because at some point during Saturn's transit of Aquarius, it will come and sit on your Sun, and that will begin a new cycle. Now, when Saturn is in your sign, we get this idea of the acquisition of gravitas. We become more substantial. We may take on more responsibilities, whether that means we take on a more powerful job, we take on a mortgage, and so we have financial responsibilities, or we become parents or even grandparents, so we take on more responsibilities. But of course, with greater power come those responsibilities, and we have to act in a responsible fashion. And that's very much what Aquarians will learn during this passage of Saturn in Aquarius. Sometimes you feel older than your years when Saturn is in your sign. You may look in the mirror and suddenly see all the tiny lines as opposed to where you were before when you didn't see anything at all. You feel your age with Saturn in your sign. But of course, that idea of gravitas, of becoming more substantial, is a good thing. And although you may experience failure from time to time when Saturn is in your sign, it's almost as though there are obstacles and setbacks. But of course, the challenge there is to meet them, is to strive to get over them. And if we think of those good Saturn words, we think about responsibility, we think about structure, we think about reality, then we can see that all those things become extremely meaningful when Saturn is in your sign. You may achieve great things during the 2 years that Saturn is in your sign, that's December through to March of 2023, but it will have been a struggle, a worthwhile struggle. If we come on to Pisces now, Saturn in Pisces, Saturn in Aquarius for Pisces is in the 12th house of your solar chart, and that is the last house of the cycle. So there are a lot of endings when Saturn is moving through the sign of Aquarius for you. It's a time of dissolution, things that are coming to an end. And it's also a very interesting transit, these 2 years, because for one reason or another, you are processing all the things that you found difficult through the preceding, if you like, 29 years, if you've lived that long. But it's still the process of dissolution, however old you are, in this 12th house area. It's a house where you may want to look at the things you feel guilty about, the things that you've given up, the things that have been disappointing, the failures. You'll be reminded of these things, whether people remind you of them, you experience, you have deja vu all over again. But the purpose is to find self-acceptance. In other words, we need to accept ourselves for our weaknesses, our fears, our failures, our disappointments to ourselves, and we need to learn to live with them. And of course, with that idea, you come into Saturn in Pisces in March of 2023 with that ability to grow in substance and stature during the time that Saturn will be in Pisces. If things come to an end, as they certainly will do in these years, 2021 to 2023, that's what's meant to happen. And you'll do a lot of closure and completion. And the other important thing, the other important word that I must say about Saturn in Aquarius for Pisces is preparation. These are a 2-year period of preparation where you'll be working on ideas and projects and even the beginning stages of a relationship, because these are all the things you will need to have in place as Saturn comes into Pisces. Aries, next sign of the zodiac. This is an interesting one because Saturn is really, in a way, in its natural house. It's in the 11th house for you. But I want to talk to you, Aries, about what happened when Saturn was in Capricorn, because for the 2 years that Saturn, 2.5 years, was in Capricorn, it was in the 10th house of your solar chart. So it was all about life direction, life goals. It was about status. It was about your place in the world. So what Saturn came along and did and made you struggle to find your place in the world. It may have meant that you had job losses or you faced loss of face in terms of how the world viewed you. You may have lost your place in the world, and of course that can mean your home, or the trappings of things that made you a certain person in the world. You've had to struggle. So what happens when Saturn moves into Aquarius is that you have achieved a certain status by the time that happens. And while Saturn is in Aquarius, you'll be looking at, what does it all mean? I've struggled to find status. I've struggled to get my place in the world. But am I happy? Am I fulfilled? What are the things that really make my dreams? I may have got a roof over my head and I may be earning a crust. But what does it all mean if I'm not fulfilled, if I'm not happy, if my dreams haven't been answered? So Saturn's transit of Aquarius for you has a lot to do with building your dreams. It also has a lot to do with collaborations and friendships. And sometimes, of course, what Saturn will do is cause difficulty with collaborations and friendships. And so friendships are lost, whether they're lost because of, a friend moves to a different part of the world and you don't see them anymore, or whether it's because there are disagreements. And I think when you think about collaborations, there's something very entrepreneurial about Saturn in Aquarius or Saturn's transit of Aquarius for you. So you may be building your entrepreneurial empire, and that means working with people, having relationships with others and working as a team. And maybe that causes difficulties because it's not always easy for Aries to work as a team. We're loners, we're independent, we're solo artists. We sometimes have a little trouble with ensemble work. So that's one of the things that has to be learned while Saturn is in Aquarius. But what you'll come out with, and I think this is, because it's not for every Aries, but if you begin your own business or you start something during the time Saturn is in Aquarius, by the time Saturn leaves Aquarius, you will have got the bones, the structure of what for you is going to be a very meaningful 2 to 4 years. And let's come back to that idea of dreams. You have to build your dreams, Aries. They don't just manifest. And also building your dreams is an important key process of the time that Saturn will be in Aquarius. Now we come to Taurus. For Taurus, while Saturn is in Aquarius, it's going to be going through your 10th house. So the 10th house is where you are out in the world. I often say when I'm teaching astrology that your ascendant and your first house are who you are. But your 10th house is who you want to be, who you're striving to become. And if you focus on just that word, you can see how Saturn can be both a blessing and a curse in this area. It can make the struggle to be who you want to be much more intense. And so there will be setbacks and failures and losses. Sometimes who we want to be is absolutely synonymous with the job we have. So it's important to find a good job when Saturn is moving through the 10th house. But oh, how difficult that can be. You are rejected by future employers or by partnerships or however you're going to get your best job. And you can experience being passed over, for instance, by someone who's less worthy than you. But of course, that's all to do with getting that steel inner core that means whatever other people think of you, you know your value. And you know that you're worth that top job or that great life or who you want to be, you know that is possible to become. So it is through striving and strife that we will get where you want to go. And of course, you've just heard me talk about Aries and how important it is once you've got there or you've done your struggle, that in the Saturn's transit of what will be your 11th house, you think, was it worth it all? What am I doing if I'm not happy with all of this? So that's an important thing, I think, to ask yourself when you lose a job or a job doesn't work out well, when you haven't got the home you wanted or the life you've struggled to put together falls apart at the seams. I think the question is really, is it worth it all? And maybe there are other things that are more worthwhile. So it's those kind of questions that happen at those peak events during that 2-year cycle that are going to be very important. But yes, you can do very well with Saturn in your 10th house. You can get an exceedingly powerful job, but remember, with power comes responsibility. And of course, quite the reverse can be there as well. Maybe have a taste of everything, that you can lose a hard-won position. But then you have to find who you are without the trappings of that job or the trappings of that lifestyle. Now, if we come to Gemini, we've got Saturn going through the 9th house. And I have to say that I think Saturn and the 9th house are rather a good combination. The 9th house is the area of far horizons. Now, of course, with Saturn in the 9th house, which is also has a lot to do with travel, a lot to do with getting about. And we look at where, Saturn is in Aquarius right now, that one of the moans that I'm hearing from a lot of Geminis is that they can't get anywhere. They haven't got freedom to maneuver. They can't travel. They can't do what they love. Doesn't necessarily mean for the next 2 years, as Saturn moves through Aquarius, that you'll be stuck, that you won't be able to go anywhere, you won't be able to travel anywhere. But it does mean perhaps this is a little bit more effort. Maybe your wings are clipped slightly. But this area of the chart has a lot to do with other things. It has to do with the law, has to do with publishing, has to do with education, especially higher education. And I think what Saturn in the 9th house offers Geminis is the ability to really study, perhaps to get extra qualifications, to get extra skills, so that when Saturn moves into the 10th house, which of course it will do in 2023, you're equipped to get a top job, or you're equipped to do things that you want to do because you've put them in practice. I have to say that I think where the law is concerned, you need to be very careful about taking legal action, because when Saturn is in your 9th house, sometimes you don't get the result you want. I mean, it is about justice. So if justice is served, but if you're not on the right side of that justice, then you will fail in lawsuits. So be very careful about all sorts of legal proceedings during the time that Saturn is moving through this area. I think, too, acquiring self-discipline is always important for Gemini. I mean, you're an air sign, you're very adaptable, versatile. You like to have a lot of things on a plate and to dabble with this and dibble with that and to have quite a scattered view of life. Well, you have to be more focused when Saturn goes through the 9th house. And with the acquisition of discipline and focus, you can achieve great things. But I have to say that given all the places Saturn could be in, that is one of the, dare I use the word, easiest? Perhaps we enjoy it more. Let's put it that way. So here we come to the sign of Cancer. Saturn for you will be in the 8th house. And here again, I want to have a look at the relationship between the 7th and 8th house. Saturn has been moving through your 7th house, along with Pluto, of course, and Jupiter now, for 2.5 to, well, actually a few more years if you consider Pluto. So it's been a very long journey, the relationship story. And of course, there's been times for all sorts of things to happen, to meet new people, to acquire new close working relationships, business partnerships, and also marriages and long-term relationships. There's been a great opportunity here. But because it's been such a long period, you've seen breakdowns of relationships, hard endings, divorces, and miserable times in relationships. So it's important that you think about what's happened, especially in the last 2.5 years before Saturn moves into the 8th house, because a lot of things follow on from your experience in the relationship world as Saturn moves into the 8th house. This is all about intimacy. And I think we do one of two things when relationships go bad. We shut up shop. We protect ourselves. We go inside ourselves. We don't share ourselves anymore. We think I'm safer if I don't open myself up. But of course, that hurts us ultimately more than being hurt by somebody. So it's sort of facing your fears. Saturn has a lot to do with fears, and it's fear of loss in this 8th house. What will happen if I lose all my money? What will happen if I lose the person I love? I don't mean the loss of the person you love through death, but through divorce or through misunderstandings and separation. But it's in facing those things and realizing that we can go through that and still be sane and strong and beautiful and loved. That's the important challenge. You have to not fear loss. For as sure as eggs are eggs, what we fear, we bring about. So hanging on to money, being fearful that we'll lose that nest egg, as sure as eggs are eggs, it'll go. But allowing money to be free-flowing and not attaching so much emotional importance to money means that money will flow and we won't lose what we fear we'll lose. And the same really with a relationship. We have to lose our attachment to people. When we allow them to go and to be, they come back to us if they choose to. And we are better with that than having somebody who doesn't want to be with us. So these are the big Saturnian lessons that you will learn as Saturn goes through the 8th house. And hopefully by the time it goes out of there and into Pisces and the 9th house in 2023, you will have learnt to live without attachment, and there is no need to fear loss anymore. Now, as we come to Leo, of course, the opposite sign, Saturn is in your opposite sign, and that means we're in the area of relationships. So, of course, some Leos will marry during this 2.5 years because Saturn has a lot to do with rules and regulations, form and structure. So putting a romantic relationship on a long-term footing, like a marriage, is what Saturn does, so that you make a formality of it. For others, it's totally the opposite. It's like a cold wind blows through the whole of love and marriage, and relationships end. They die. They fall away. Sometimes if there's a lack of love or a lack of water on a plant, it shrivels and dies, becomes etiolated without sunlight. And this is what happens when Saturn moves through the relationship area. It's almost as though there is no light, no water on a relationship, and it becomes etiolated. There's not a lot you can do about that. If that's going to happen, that's the process that has to happen. And as you heard me talk to Cancer and about fear of losing, fear of loss is what you have to overcome. So it's really no point trying to hang on to something that really has done its day. However, there is a point in hanging on to something that's really full of value and will stand the test of time. And that's what you tend to discover when Saturn is moving through the 7th house. And of course, this can be for working relationships, business partnerships, every bit as much as it can for romantic relationships and things like marriage. Sometimes the partner goes through a very, very difficult time. And that means that you have to step up to the plate, Leo, and carry the burden. You're carrying the burden of the relationship. Now, in many ways, this might be a joy to be the one who becomes the breadwinner or who takes on the responsibility of the relationship. But of course, with a relationship, if there's only one partner doing it, you can get very lopsided and it causes inequality in a relationship. All these things are liable to surface while Saturn is moving through your 7th house. And the last thing I want to say about this is mirrors. Anything in our 7th house is a mirror. So you need to remind yourself when you're having difficulties with a partner, business partner, marriage partner, that's actually holding a mirror up to you. Are these things you've been guilty of in the past? Is this something you fear in yourself and you don't like in yourself and you're now dealing with it with a partner or someone else? If you can say honestly, oops, I think I can see that, then my goodness, Saturn will more than have done a good job in the 7th house. So now we come to Virgo and Saturn moving through the 6th house in your chart for the next, let's have a look at the 6th house for Virgo. This, in a way, is your natural territory. When we think about Virgo, we think about 6th house things. So I think this is, in a way, a sort of, not a period of grace while Saturn is moving through the 6th house for you, but it sort of does bring a lot of your qualities and values into play. And when we think of Saturn constructing as opposed to constricting, you get to construct some of those, well, not value systems exactly, but some of the aspects of your existence that create the pillars of life for you. And it can be a quite period of welcome kind of structure, if we can put it that way. The 6th house is the area of service. It's where we put ourselves out to help other people. It's also an area that I associate with systems. These can be health systems. They can be the systems by which our life runs. So we're looking at our lifestyle. And it's also where we can put in the rules of engagement when it comes to relationships. So this idea of Saturn structure is very useful. We do a lot of work of relating in the 6th house. We put in a lot of learning curves in how to relate to other people and what we want out of relationships and what we're prepared to give. We learn how to devote ourselves to other people, other causes, to work itself, and to celebrate that. When we think about health systems, while Saturn moves through the 6th house, we become aware of our weaknesses. So where our health is weak, we need to strengthen. And also, I want to put dental health in here as well, because this is a time to really strengthen and improve those things which might not be working too well. So this 2.5-year period offers you, Virgo, a time to really get your health into, ship-shape form, and not to forget your dental health. Sometimes, of course, I think work can be a chore. You know how we say we either live to work or we work to live. And sometimes it can be a case of working to live while Saturn is moving through the 6th house. And so you become very tired of your job, and you're tired of the workplace. You're tired of having to do things. It seems that everything is a burden. And I think even if you don't have a job and you don't go out to work, maybe you're tired, or maybe you never have to work. It's almost as though that daily routine becomes very tiresome and repetitive. But here's where this whole idea of devotion and service comes in. You know that word seva, which is finding your spiritual path, if you like, in what you do every day. And it is in that repetitive doing of daily things and the things that seem to be very mundane, that in a strange kind of way is a kind of spiritual service. And that sixth house, as it is opposite the 12th house, has a definite aura of spiritual service about it. So that's something else for you to think of, Virgo, as Saturn moves through your sixth house from 2021 to 2023. Libra, Saturn moves through your fifth house. And this is a very, very interesting place for Saturn to be. Because when we think of Saturnian structure, we think how you can make your creative self into something solid so that those creative ideas of yours can become manifest, which is a very powerful theme and it's a very good theme. But you know something? We sometimes get the opposite, so that we get the restriction of creativity. And I'm reminded here about writer's block. I mean, if you're a writer, I'm a writer, you know, it happens sometimes you just can't get the words out. And I think sometimes if you're an artist, you find your creative muse somehow is lost. But you know, it's the powering through that. Saturn is offering you the ability to power through your block, because once you've done it, you will never, ever have writer's block again, or a creative block. That's one way of looking at Saturn in the fifth. There's also procreativity. And we could say Saturn will make manifest your procreative desires. So you bring something solid into being in the form of a child. Or maybe you're a grandparent and it's a grandchild. But you know, it can do the same thing. Saturn can delay pregnancy. It can make pregnancy very, very hard work. But yet we struggle on. We are determined to create with Saturn in the fifth house, whatever the odds, whatever, you know, stands in front of us. I also think this house has a lot to do with one's offspring or with young people and children generally. So it may be that we're asked to parent in a way where we're really mentoring our children. Maybe our children will cost us more money or time or energy, but that's what Saturn is transiting the fifth house for. That's what it's all about. And of course, what else can our children do? They can teach us lessons. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, I'm sure, Libra, in these next 2 years, 2021 to 2023, your offspring or younger people, children, they will teach you great things. Out of their mouths will come profound words. And now we come to Scorpio and Saturn in the fourth house. Now, this is a very interesting place because this house is sometimes called the house of endings and beginnings. And in many ways, it is, for me, more the roots of life that we see here. And if we look at that in conjunction with the opposite house, the 10th house, and the MCIC axis, if the 10th house in the midheaven is who we're striving to become, the fourth house in the IC is where we've come from. It's our ancestry. It's our roots. But it's also the foundations of the future we build when we've got planets going through the fourth house. And with Saturn, that structure needs to be very strong. It's a bit like building a skyscraper. You've got to go deep, deep, deep into the earth to support that towering structure. So it's going to take time. Scorpio, a lot of things are going to take time for you in that period, 2021 to 2023. But it is important that everything you put in place, the foundations of your future, are put in correctly and that they are strong and stable. Now, sometimes as Saturn moves through the fourth house, we become very fed up with our home life. Is it because we're just not enjoying being at home? And considering where we are at the moment with Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn through the fourth house, a lot of us are very tired of being at home. And it doesn't mean that the next 2 years you're going to be under house arrest. But it does mean that one becomes very dissatisfied with aspects of home life. It may be that you feel, oh, I need to paint those walls, get a conservatory, I need a new sofa. But what's blocking that is finance. You can't afford it. Or it becomes difficult because there's a mortgage weighing on your shoulders, and struggling to pay the mortgage is what Saturn is doing through the fourth house. It can mean that one's elders are a source or a burden. I mean, they might be a welcome burden, but they're a burden nonetheless. We have to take responsibility for the elder generation. And maybe, we have to look at the elderly in general, because one day we will be old in turn. And what we have to do is to prepare for our old age, so that we have to put in place pensions and funeral plans and things that go with old age. That's partly what Saturn is doing as it trundles away through the fourth house. It's not always an exuberant period of time, because the fourth house is so intimately connected with our home space, our home in the sense of where we live, and being at home with ourselves and our family and the people we love. So it can be a struggle, but believe you me, what you set in place, what you do while Saturn is in the fourth house, will last a lifetime. And, the way I've looked at this with the 10th house, who do you want to be in your career? This axis is so important in terms of overcoming the setbacks that you have and making you stronger in the long term. So as we come to the third house of the horoscope, and we're now looking at Sagittarius, the next sign of the zodiac. Again, a little bit like Gemini, your opposite sign in the 9th house, Saturn in the 3rd house can be an incredibly helpful transit. And we've got 2.5 years to try this. What I think about the 3rd house often, it is the house of the mind, but it's also the house of the voice. This is where your voice can be heard. So when we think of Saturn going through the 3rd house, it may be that your voice can't be heard for a while. Now, is that because you've got bronchitis? You have something so that your vocal cords aren't working well? A kind of literal expression of Saturn in the 3rd? Or is it because your ability to reach out to people is somehow curtailed? Does that mean that the job you had, where you were communicating with a lot of people, teaching, educating them even, has now changed? You haven't got that job anymore. Does it mean that people don't want to hear you anymore? Are you a writer? Are you a blogger? Are you a broadcaster? And suddenly that ability to reach your audience with your ideas and thoughts isn't there anymore. And of course, when we think of writing per se, in Gemini, the house of Gemini is all about writing and communicating. Perhaps too, this gives you an opportunity over the next 2.5 years to research, to build up a body of knowledge. Maybe rather like the 9th house, you get to go back to school. You get to learn more. You get to acquire new skills. And with those skills, you go forward. You earn more money. You gain more clout as, in whatever way you believe gaining more clout actually is experienced. And I think, too, with Saturn in the 3rd, I think with Sagittarius, you're a broad brushstroke sort of person. You like to do things quickly, at speed. And sometimes that means you skim the surface of things. And that's why some of your ambitions don't reach fulfillment, while you fail to complete projects, while jobs fade out, relationships don't work. It's because you skim the surface. You haven't really put in the work. You haven't really focused on things. And so what Saturn offers you while it goes through the 3rd house is the discipline to really build up knowledge, and that knowledge doesn't have to mean just the knowledge of 1 or 2 things, a study course. It can be the knowledge of a person. And by building up knowledge, and experience you gain in wisdom and maturity. And if nothing else, Saturn is the planet of maturity, the planet of age. So there will be some very happy kind of products of Saturn moving through this third house. And you may well find that you come out of it with letters behind your name or extra skills. But also, if your voice is to be heard, it's going to be a voice that says something. And perhaps that's the most important thing to come out of this particular house. And now, Capricorn. Saturn in Aquarius for you is in a very interesting part of the horoscope. It's moving through the second house of self-worth. Now, when we think about Saturn's transit of your sign, and perhaps you remember what I said to Aquarius at the very beginning of this video, that you become substantial while Saturn is in your sign because of the events that happen to you and the responsibilities you take on. You acquire gravitas. So when Saturn moves into the second house, which it will do on December the 17th, right through until March of 2023, you're building on the substance that you have already acquired. Now, this is the house of money and the house of self-worth. They're sort of interlinked because how we value ourselves in terms of who we are and what we offer, there's that kind of value, but it's often interlinked with the idea of how much money we earn, how much value other people place in us, and also the valuables that we have, the possessions that we have, which make us of substance. They're both kind of interlinked. So you might think that when Saturn moves through the second house, and I have to say here that if you're studying astrology and you see Saturn in the second house, it doesn't mean that somebody won't have money. A lot of millionaires and billionaires have Saturn in the second house. And why is that? It's because money is responsibility. With great power, with great wealth comes responsibility. And that's what can happen when Saturn transits your second house, Capricorn. You can actually come into money. You can make a lot of money. You can come into money. But that money, well, not only does it come with responsibility, but it can come with a cost. Because as you know, when you make money or you do well, sometimes that loses you friends and people you love. So that's the kind of cost that can come with a second house or a transit of the second house of Saturn. So it doesn't mean that you're going to lose money or find money difficult. It's how you manage it, how you deal with the responsibility and burden of it that makes or breaks this particular transit. Now, for other Capricorns, money may indeed be in short supply. And what you're going to have to do is to struggle to earn it and use it and, make ends meet. But you know what you'll come out of that by the time Saturn leaves the second house and goes into the third is just how resourceful you are. The second house and Saturn have a lot to do with digging deep for your resources so that you'll find resources you didn't know you had. And that can mean in terms of finding ways to make money, finding ways to, make money go further. But it can also mean resources in the sense that, inner strength and the ability to really come up strong when faced with either people who don't believe in you or people who don't value you, the ability to know that value in yourself. And I said a little bit about that when Saturn was in the 10th house for Taurus. It's that knowing that even if you get rejected or get passed over in a job, that you know your own worth, you know your own value, and you know that it's all very temporary. So Saturn in the second house can do a lot for your ego. It can do a lot for your sense of self-worth in so many ways. And remember, there's a 2.5-year period for you to encounter all of this. And I would say too, Capricorn, when we think about Saturn, it's your ruling planet. So it's always going to have a plus factor. one of the things I think, as Saturn started its journey through Capricorn 2.5 years ago, and it's now moving to the next door neighbor sign, that you, of all the signs, seem to be growing in strength, that the adversity that you've been through you seem to wear it well. And maybe as we go through 2021 to 2023, you'll start to realize this as well. So I've been through the whole zodiac, but I want to wrap up really by saying that I think the quintessential factor about this transit of Saturn in Aquarius, whatever sign of the zodiac we are, it has a lot to do with freedom. At some point, the freedom to do something we want, the freedom to be someone we want to be, however you look at freedoms to express yourself, freedoms to be with the person you want to be. That word freedom, Aquarius and Saturn, mean that we have to learn about the restrictions on our freedom. But we can find freedom even in a restricted place, because we find that sense of freedom in ourselves. And maybe ultimately, if there is a neat little nutshell phrase you can say for Saturn in Aquarius, it is finding the spirit of freedom within ourselves. So thank you for joining me here and this tour around the zodiac, courtesy of Saturn and Aquarius. And we'll talk more about this transit and the age of Aquarius as we go through the next few weeks and months. Bye for now.